Back at the turn of the next to last century, if a photograph looked like a painting, well, then it was considered to be art. 100 years later, take your camera to that same spot, point and shoot, call it art, who's gonna stop you? Back then, Detroit Publishing had to invent the sunset. Well, they had to invent a way to colorize a black and white photo like this one from Fisherman's Wharf and make it look like a sunset. So if you're going to San Francisco and you're looking for your heart as well as some postcards, both new and old, there's no better way to do that than to jump on the trolley car, head straight downtown San Francisco. Oh, these are exciting times. Postcards were news vehicles 100 years ago. They gave people the visual substance for their thoughts. They were the news of the day. Imagine yourself standing next to the Latte Fountain, downtown San Francisco, April 18, 1906. This is where Enrico Caruso witnessed from his window in the Palace Hotel the destruction of San Francisco from an earthquake. The story of an eyewitness, the San Francisco earthquake, 1906, by Jack London. Not in history has a modern imperial city been so completely destroyed. San Francisco is gone. Nothing remains of it but memories and a fringe of dwelling houses on its outskirts. An hour after the earthquake's shock, the smoke of San Francisco was a lurid tower visible 100 miles away. And for 3 days and nights, this lurid tower swayed in the sky, reddening the sun, darkening the day, and filling the land with smoke. On Wednesday morning at 5:15 came the earthquake. A minute later, the flames were leaping upward in a dozen different quarters south of Market Street. In the working-class ghetto and in the factories, fires started. There was no opposing the flames. There was no organization, no communication. All the cunning adjustments of the 20th century city had been smashed by the earthquake. The streets were humped into ridges and depressions and piled with the debris of fallen walls. The telephone and telegraph systems were disrupted, and the great water mains had burst. All the shrewd contrivances and safeguards of man had been thrown out of gear by 30 seconds of the twitching of the earth crust. By Wednesday afternoon, inside of 12 hours, half of the heart of the city was gone. Wednesday night saw the destruction of the very heart of the city. Dynamite was used, and many of San Francisco's proudest structures were crumbled by man himself into ruins. But there was no withstanding the onrush of the flames. Time and again, successful stands were made by the firefighters, and every time the flames flanked around from the other side or came up from the rear and turned to defeat the hard-won victory. Remarkable as it may seem, Wednesday night, while the whole city crashed and roared into ruin, was a quiet night. There were no crowds, there was no shouting and yelling, there was no hysteria, no disorder. I passed Wednesday night in the path of the advancing flames, and in all of those terrible hours I saw not one woman who wept, not one man who was excited, not one person who was in the slightest degree panic-stricken. An hour later I was creeping past the shattered dome of City Hall, then that there is no better exhibit of the destructive force of the earthquake. Most of the stone had been shaken from the great dome, leaving standing the naked framework of steel. Market Street was piled high with the wreckage, and across the wreckage lay the overthrown pillars of City Hall, shattered into short, crosswise sections. This section of the city was already a waste of smoking ruins. Here and there, through the smoke, creeping wearily under the shadows of tottering walls, emerged occasional men and women. It was like the meeting of a handful of survivors after the day of the end of the world.